Te Dakota, Te Whanau, Auckland, Unitarians. Te Dakota, Nā Monahiri. No mai, haere mai ki tene whare karakia. A te atoa, Te Dakota, Te Tato, katoa. Good morning and welcome to this space, this sanctuary of peace where we come not only to create our best selves, but also to do the work of creating a beloved community. We come together today as individuals, much like individual pieces of glass or pottery that are different shapes, sizes, and colors, all of which are broken with imperfect, jagged edges, but always beautiful. While our pieces may not always fit neatly together, it is within this sanctuary, guided by our principles, that we gather together to create a beautiful mosaic. May the brokenness and beauty you find in one another create peace in this space and fill our hearts with love as we create worship together. You're especially welcome if you're a guest or a visitor this morning. Thank you for taking a chance to walk through our doors and give us your time. We hope you'll find this a safe place to be who you are. We invite you to remain for morning tea. We consider it part of our service. It is our sacrament of hospitality, and it won't be complete without you. My opening words are by Matthew Johnson, and it's kind of a reflection on his own life and true history that we should all be aware of. It's entitled Asking for Refuge. In 8th grade, we were assigned a project to make a poster about some part of our ancestry. I made mine about the story of the 1930 migration from Germany to the United States of my great-grandmother, her husband, and their 3 children. My great-grandmother, Emma, her husband, Carl, and their children sailed for New York and made their way by train to Washington State. Carl had fought in the First World War for the Kaiser, and Carl saw the signs. He knew by 1930 that another war was coming. So they sold the house and vineyard and left Europe behind. They sailed on the merchant ship St. Louis. 9 years later, on May 13, 1939, the St. Louis sailed from Hamburg, Germany, for Havana, Cuba. On the voyage were 937 passengers. Almost all were Jews fleeing from the Third Reich. The majority of passengers had applied for U.S. visas and had planned to stay in Cuba only until they could enter the United States. The drama of the arrival in Cuba was complicated. Most of them were denied entry. Negotiations to secure their entry were unsuccessful. The new Cuban president had supported Franco, who had been supported by Hitler, and he wanted a bribe that the refugees were unable to pay. Hostility toward immigrants fueled both anti-Semitism and xenophobia. Agents of Nazi Germany and indigenous right-wing movements hyped the immigrant issue in their publications and demonstrations, claiming that incoming Jews were communists. Reports about the impending voyage fueled a large anti-Semitic demonstration in Havana on May 8th, 5 days before the St. Louis sailed from Hamburg. The rally, the largest anti-Semitic demonstration in Cuban history, had been sponsored by a former Cuban president. His spokesman urged Cubans to fight the Jews until the last one was driven out. A few passengers were accepted, but 743 were not. They went north, sailing so close to Florida that they could see the lights of Miami. Some passengers on the St. Louis cabled President Franklin D. Roosevelt asking for refuge. Roosevelt never responded. The State Department and the White House had decided not to take extraordinary measures to permit the refugees to enter the United States. Public opinion in the United States, although ostensibly sympathetic to the plight of refugees and critical of Hitler's policies, continued to favor immigration restrictions. Roosevelt was not alone in his reluctance to challenge the mood of the nation on the immigration issue. The ship was turned away. The official account for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum concludes as follows. Following the U.S. government's refusal to permit the passengers to disembark, the St. Louis sailed back to Europe on June 6, 1939. Jewish organizations negotiated with 4 European governments to secure entry visas for the passengers. Great Britain took 288. The Netherlands admitted 181. Belgium took 214. And 224 found at least temporary refuge in France. Of the 288 passengers admitted by Great Britain, all survived World War II, save one. Of the 620 passengers who returned to the continent, 87 managed to immigrate before the German invasion of Western Europe in May 1940. 532 St. Louis passengers were trapped when Germany conquered Western Europe. Just over half, 278, survived the Holocaust. The rest, 254 souls, were murdered. He goes on to say, every time I read this account, I weep. I weep because my family got on the boat and got off and took the train, and so I live. Every time I read this account, I weep. I don't know what else to say. I want to take every politician and pundit, everyone whose heart has shrunk 2 sizes too small, and sit down at a table together, a kitchen table perhaps, where we sing with joy, with sorrow, we pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks and recall our ancestors. And I'll read the account of the St. Louis and its passengers, and I'll read it again, and I'll read it again, and I'll read it again. Until their hearts are open and their conscience awakes. We light this chalice today in honor of the Unitarian first principle, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We recognize that these are not just words to be spoken. Instead, they call us out of our comfort into an ever-deepening commitment, a commitment we make to the rights of all whose inherent worth and dignity are denied, diminished, or destroyed by systems of oppression. And they call us into the practice of looking into our own hearts with courage and honesty. It's pretty difficult to escape having difficult people in our lives who drive us to distraction, from simple annoyance to outright fury. These are often people we have to live with because they are our boss or coworker, an obnoxious neighbor, family members, and sometimes even lifelong friends who are enmeshed within our lives. Seeking ways to respond appropriately or effectively to their behavior we find objectionable is often the cause of many a sleepless night. If one person can disrupt our peace, like a certain minister did, how do we respond when it is a whole country? I'm finding my antipathy towards our cousins across the ditch growing exponentially. I fear Australia is going to drive me into anger management classes. It's not the faux anger exchanged in our usually good-humored sibling rivalry over the provenance of a racehorse or a meringue pudding or on the sports field. This is the anger of a boy in the schoolyard relieved of his lunch money day after day by a bully. This is the anger that wishes the Tasman Sea that separates us was a lot wider than an average 1,300 miles or 2,028 to 2,800 kilometers. Before I go further, I need to say, I'm certainly not referring to all Aussies. One of the bishops of Brisbane, I'm proud to call a friend, is an outspoken, progressive, justice-seeking colleague. I know many Uniting Church clergy, and of course Unitarians, who are resisting the racist and xenophobic policies of their government and honoring their indigenous peoples. But in some of my travels, I have met others who would make Trump blush, who long for the days, or think it's funny to talk about it, when it was not an unusual event to massacre Aboriginal Australians. The last officially sanctioned massacre was in 1928. I'm not suggesting New Zealand's record in its treatment of its First Peoples is unblemished. Far from it. Kate Hunter, a dual citizen who moved from Australia to New Zealand in 1995 and teaches Australian history at Victoria University, points out that the two countries' shared legacy of colonialization includes for their native populations shorter life expectancy and overrepresentation in most statistics of poverty and incarceration. But in 1899, when New Zealand was invited to join a federated Australia, it considered and rejected the idea. Part of our reluctance, says Hunter, was the implications for the Maori population. Australian Aboriginal people had few rights, while Australia continued to use Pacific Islanders as colored labor. In contrast with Australia, she points out, the Crown signed a treaty with the Maori in 1840, and Indigenous people gained the vote long before they did across the Tasman. When I was seeking a refuge from George W. Bush, friends asked why I was choosing New Zealand over Australia. My flippant response was, if I wanted to live in America light, I'd stay in the U.S. However, it was not until I got here and later traveled to Australia that I discovered how different the two cultures are. We may be cousins due to our colonial history and geographical proximity, but we are third cousins twice removed. We had somewhat of a family reunion during World War I, which we remember nostalgically, I'll get that out, as the Anzac Spirit, when we died together at Gallipoli as British cannon fodder. It allowed for good relations through much of the 20th century, resulting in an arrangement in 1973 for the citizens of both countries to travel and work freely between them and receive many of the same benefits as the citizens of the country to which they moved. But that has largely come under strain, with a string of changes limiting New Zealanders' access to social security and citizenship in Australia. Other policies, such as a hike in student fees, have led to accusations that the ANZAC spirit has been betrayed. Kate Hunter sees these changes as a grave threat. I think they have been, she says, I think they have been corrosive of the trans-Tasman relationship. New Zealanders feel really quite viscerally angry about that. In a monologue on the New Zealand Current Affairs television show, The Project, a format licensed from its Australian masters, host Jess Mulligan, seized on the plight of Kiwis in Australia. Forget the trans-Tasman friendship in 2017. Australia is basically a bully. He asked the Australian Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, when you say you'll find it hard to work with New Zealand, what exactly do you mean? How much worse could it possibly get? Well, we've found out. Since 2001, Australia has treated two of our South Pacific neighbors, Nauru and Papua New Guinea's Manus Island, as economic vassals. They have used their power over them to force them to warehouse refugees seeking asylum in Australia. As Australia has no intention of resettling them, their detention sees no end. Many Kiwis, but sadly not all, have been horrified by this policy and have actively protested. Our Prime Minister's offer to take 150 of them was turned down flat in a condescending manner. Then recently, Australia sought to deport New Zealanders who have lived their whole lives in Australia and have no ties to New Zealand. I mention these only as headlines because they both have much longer and complicated stories. While racist and xenophobic attitudes certainly run through our culture, it was gratifying to see a large and diverse crowd last Friday evening gather at Aotea Square. The crowd was rallying in protest of hate speech by two white supremacist Canadians, invited by a few Kiwis of similar views to speak that evening in Auckland. Essentially, Auckland refused them a venue. When a private venue had second thoughts, when they saw the level of outrage at their actions, they canceled the event. The message that night seemed to be, no, it's not easy to be a multicultural community. We have our differences. We are still working through the problems. But in the long run, we welcome diversity and find strength in it. It seemed to be saying, don't come here from elsewhere and seek to divide us. We have no desire to be Australia now any more than we did in 1899. Because of its sheer size, Australia has always looked down on us. Barry Humphries satirized the relationship by giving his alter ego, Dame Edna Everage, a tiny, somber, silent New Zealand bridesmaid, Madge Alsop of Palmerston North. In their HBO sitcom, The Flight of the Conchords, the comedy duo struck back, painting Australians as big-headed oafs with a wide repertoire of sheep-based put-downs. They were standing up to bullying. Aussies didn't get the joke. They seemed to think of us as idiots, but we are their idiots. So how do we deal with a country that in too many ways offends us, bullies us, has way too much economic power in our economy, is an important trading partner, whose history and previous immigration policies have enmeshed us. And when it seems unlikely, the ditch between us is going to grow wide enough to suit us. Is it going to take another World War family reunion to build a bridge over the Tasman Sea? Let's hope not. We may benefit by understanding bullying and effective responses to it. Bullies don't stop bullying when they become adults. Someone with an inflated sense of importance, a deep need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others, and who is also vulnerable to criticism can, in the right circumstances, become a bully who attempts to get their own way through aggressive, threatening, and hurtful behavior towards those who have less power. Bullies are only as powerful as we allow them to be. The story of David and Goliath is a classic example of the weak vanquishing the strong. But taking power from them is not always as simple as it might seem. So I've come armed with some suggestions from leading authorities on the subject. 1, be confident. Bullies lose their power if you don't cower. Deep down, they doubt they deserve your respect. They admire you for speaking with self-assurance and confidence. So when they bombard, don't counterpunch. Rather, win them over with your strong, firm, courteous demeanor. 2, stay connected. Bullies operate by making their victims feel alone and powerless. Children reclaim their power when they make and maintain connections with faithful friends and supportive adults. Adults can do the same. 3, use simple, unemotional language. An assertive but unemotional response lets a bully know that the victim does not intend to be victimized. It does not seek forgiveness, but does not pose a challenge either. Because a challenge gives a bully the attention and sense of power she or he is seeking. 4, set limits. The trick is to remain polite and professional while still setting your limits firmly. Don't let the bully get under your skin. That's what he wants. Practice your response so you're prepared the next time something happens and you can respond swiftly without getting emotional. Keep it simple and straightforward. For example, I don't think your tone is appropriate. 5, act quickly and consistently. The longer a bully has power over a victim, the stronger the hold becomes. Oftentimes, bullying begins in a relatively mild form, name-calling, teasing, or minor physical aggression. After the bully has tested the waters and confirmed that a victim is not going to tell an adult to stand up for his rights, the aggression worsens. Strike while the iron is cold. Sometimes all you have to do with a bully is wait a little while. Rather than exchange hostility, step back so that you're not responding in the heat of the moment and meeting them on their own level. Cool heads find solutions more easily than hot ones. Besides, if you step back, they may do the dirty work for you. Never interfere with an enemy while they're in the process of destroying themselves. Every one of these suggestions might not work, but the trick is don't give up hope. If you try something and nothing happens right away, you have to keep at it and stay consistent. I don't know how well these strategies might work with a country that bullies, but our efforts were rewarded this week when they were practiced against the 2 white supremacists from Canada. Maybe they will also work in regards to our cousins as well. For our meditation, I'd like to share this by Alex Capitan, Meditation on Opposites. Spirit of the universe, life force that flows through all beings, power beyond our knowing. We ask you to help us see beyond our dependence on opposites, to transcend our desire to know who is like us and who is not. Open us to the knowledge that in this room there are complexities and diversities of identities, beyond black and white, old and young, woman and man, poor and rich, uneducated and educated, disabled and able-bodied, gay and straight, ill and healthy, wrong and right, broken and whole. In this room, there are people who embody juxtaposition, who can tell stories written on their bodies about both and neither, who carry intimate pieces of the truth that there is no such thing as opposites. Spirit of many names and of no name at all, help us find release from our belief that all things must be either or. This belief that walls us off from one another, ensnaring us in a battle of same versus different. Help us to open our minds to deeply listen and to truly know one another, finally glimpsing the kaleidoscopic beauty of the divine. My closing words are from a poem by Jude Jordan, a poem for South African women, which she presented at the UN on August 9th, 1978. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones we have been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we have been waiting for.